evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for April 2nd, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On tonight's agenda, we have the swearing of a new police officer. We have to discuss a street sign request, some Upton Mendon School funding request, discussion on some appointments to the Fire and EMS Advisory Board, discussion for request of planting of a tree on public property. We have to execute the town meeting warrant, and discuss the mission statement of the Electronic Voting Committee. At this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Chief Bradley for the swearing of the new officer.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
It's my pleasure tonight to introduce our newest police officer, Paul Mansfield. Paul is a resident of the town of Upton. He comes to us with over 8 years of experience as a full-time patrol officer in both the town of Mendon and the town of Millville. He's a 2010 graduate of the Municipal Police Training Council's full-time academy. He's a certified Massachusetts emergency medical technician, and he also possesses an associate's degree in criminal justice. Paul also possesses instructor certifications that will serve the Upton Police Department well moving forward. He's certified as an instructor, CPR, first responder, Narcan, and quick clot applications. So I'm confident that Officer Mansfield will be a valuable asset to our community for years to come. So at this time, I'd like to call the town clerk up to administer the oath of office.
Raise your right hand. I, Paul Mansfield,
I, Paul Mansfield,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully
that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
incumbent upon me
incumbent upon me
as a patrol officer
as a patrol officer
for the town of Upton,
for the town of Upton,
according to the best of my ability
according to the best of my ability
and understanding,
and understanding,
agreeably to the rules
agreeably to the rules
and the regulations of the police department,
and the regulations of the police department,
the Constitution
Constitution,
and the laws of the United States,
and the laws of the United States,
and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
and under rules, regulations, and bylaws
and under rules, regulations, and bylaws
of the town of Upton,
of the town of Upton,
made under the authority thereof,
made under the authority thereof,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call Paul's wife Abby up and his 2 daughters. Then his Upton police badge. Thank you.
Anything else?
Paul has anything to say?
I just want to thank the town manager and the board for, and the chief and the department for allowing me this great opportunity to serve the town of Upton. I really look forward to it and looking to be a part of the community and serve the community as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Anything?
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The board's on.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see. The next agenda item. Does anybody want to make a motion for the regular session minutes for March 13th and 19th?
You said we have some February meetings in there as well?
I have March March 13th and 19th.
Okay. Yeah, you know what, you probably have the right one.
See you.
There you go. There goes our participation. I do not have the dates, so if you have the dates, March 13th and 19th?
Yes.
Okay.
You go with the minutes from March 13th and 19th?
Yeah,
You can make a motion?
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the regular session meeting minutes from March 13th and March 19th.
Second. It's unanimous action. We're going to skip over discussion item 4.1 for a few minutes until the fire chief can come back. We're going to go to discussion item 4.2. Oh, I meant the police chief, sorry. Wrong chief. To discuss the Mendon Upton Regional School funding request. Good evening.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good.
Good, how are you?
Over there?
Please.
I'm sorry, you might want to sit there, please.
Anything you say, you guys good?
Good. Thank you for coming back.
Sure.
We received your updated request. And,
I sent you the minutes from the
Yeah.
meeting. I sent you the quote we had on the cameras. I sent the quote on the playground. I've discussed it with your ADA compliance officer, and I talked to somebody else in Newton as well about it. But
What was their take?
what's that?
What was their take on sort of the requirements and where the both of the playgrounds stood? I assume they were already ADA compliant.
They are, and the stuff we're going to put down, that kind of surface is more than compliant.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's an issue. I mean, I assume that during the process of this, the compliance officer for the town, which I believe Mrs. Haggerty, would go out and take a look, and if there's anything that she thinks we need to, correct, we would do that.
And do we have any sense, I know the quote didn't include the subsurface, so it's assuming they're going to use the existing subsurface.
No, they do. They inspect it all.
That's what I was gonna say.
In essence, that's what we did at Clough as well.
Perfect, that's what I was going to
It's
say.
all about bounce
Peel it
factor.
back a little bit and just sort
Well,
of.
they're gonna pull the whole front stuff off, right?
I understand, but the reason they didn't include it in the quote, I would assume, is because they looked at it and saw that the subsurface looks pretty good. I just
Yeah.
don't want to surprise $50,000.
Yeah, no, there wouldn't be.
Looks like it's good.
That would kill us. These things are expensive enough.
Yeah.
yeah, I did drive down there and I looked at both the surfaces. It's
They're pretty tough.
pretty poor condition, yeah.
They've been like that for a few years. They definitely need some work.
How long do they typically last, do we know?
Well, so those lasted, the school opened in 2004, I want to say. So you're talking, it was probably ripped up like that a couple of years ago, so it's about 12 years. But they also, back when they first opened, they used to go out and snow blow it and shovel it so the kids could go out there, and I think that didn't help longevity. So we've stopped that, especially at Clough, because it's new.
Yeah.
Basically, if the snow's there, either play in the snow or don't play there.
Yeah.
And it'll be the same at Memorial once we fix this up. We're not going to shovel them anymore. We're not going to clear them anymore.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll get, they say 10 to 12 years. I think you're probably talking 15.
Yeah. Yeah. This has nothing to do with anything except my own curiosity. What color is it going to be? I know it said 50% color, 50% black, but I didn't know what the color was.
So I don't know any more than what it said there.
Okay.
He looked at it and, he gave us 3
It's like
quotes.
blue is what's
The
there.
original quote was like another 10,000 for that color.
Yeah.
Whatever color he's talking about, as long as it's a good surface, I'm okay with.
Yeah. Well, just black might get hot for the kids, so that's.
Yeah, I don't think it's I think it's a mixture of a lighter color, just mixed together. But
Yeah, that's actually not a bad question, a good question, I should say, because of the school colors. So I didn't know if there was any way to incorporate the school color, but
There you go.
in
Color
elementary school, it may not make much difference.
yeah, so you want green there, right?
Tell me
No Hopedale blue, I get it.
There you go, you got it.
if you tell him the cost extra, he wants the plain color.
Okay.
Good?
Just, if I could, just to provide a little bit of clarity, Patrick Oach is our building commissioner, and I talked to him this morning about this. He's also our ADA compliance officer.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready, I know you have to go out to bid, and whenever that contractor's ready, if he could just check in with Pat Roach.
Okay.
He will ensure that this meets all standards.
Yes, I mean, when I went, I know the surface itself is definitely accessible. It's the egress in and out. The back one has a sidewalk straight in, no lip or no anything. There's a gate there. It's perfectly flat, I'm sure, and it's concrete, so I don't think that's an issue. The front one, we have a concrete walk But I'm not sure about the pitch of that. That's the thing. You know, I think it's allowed to rise a certain number of inches per feet. And if that's the case, we may have to build a little something else and make it accessible from the outside. From the inside, it's straight out. There's no lip or anything. So it's definitely accessible from in the building, but I think it has to be accessible from outside as well.
Yeah, so as long as you
Right.
connect with Pat, he'll make sure
Yeah, we will.
that it's compliant.
And then what camera system did you guys end up deciding to go with? Just the 5 or?
No, we really need to do the whole shebang there. So I'm hoping that we'll get some support on that as well. You know, the vendor on that one is the same guy that puts cameras in all over Town Hall and everywhere else. And, you know, we want to make sure they're compatible with what the police department uses, so they'll have the feed.
Any other questions, gentlemen? I'm here. Do you have anything?
No, the quote's pretty all-inclusive, so I don't have any other questions.
And I think,
On which, on both, or on the cameras?
I'm actually looking at the one on the playground.
Yeah.
So I guess the thoughts are, do we have any thoughts or regarding the cameras? Do you want to just include it in the same appropriation?
Yep. Anything we ask is you
Well, I
bill
think it
it.
has to be from 2 different accounts, right? Do we have the money for both of these in one account?
Yes.
We do, okay.
Yeah, actually, it was, you know, I was just talking to Paul about this. It's only the interest because the principal's not touchable, and
Right.
there's about 192,000, I
Okay,
think, in the
cover
account.
Perfect.
You know, I kind of feel that, you know, we're kind of hitting it hard, but then again, I don't think it's been touched in 100 years, so,
What it's there for. School money.
yeah.
Probably
and, you
another
know,
100 years until you have that kind of
Well,
money.
Paul will still be here, so he'll keep us in track.
He'll let you know.
But,
I don't think so. If you say that again, I will ask the off the chief to remove it.
That's great.
Go ahead, Mr. Clary.
I want to be the skunk at the lawn party, and I understand the whole purpose of this. The principal is 150 or 100?
112 today.
It's 112. Does anybody have any idea how long it took to accrue $190-something thousand in interest? Just keep that in mind. You hit this today, it's going to be a long time before you touch it again.
Yeah, we've discussed that before, like it's gone, and it won't come back, certainly anywhere near this for another 100 years, so.
I mean,
Right.
this quote's like, what's it, 121 for the playground and about 15 for the cameras, right?
Yeah.
So it's about 135, so it leaves 65 as still accessible. But we don't have plans to come hit you every year and say, hey, we need more money. This was something that really needs to get done, and when I learned about this particular account, it seemed like a good way to deal with this, you know, and make it so, because those areas, like you said, they're really not usable right now.
Right, right. And obviously fairly expensive building proposition here, so.
Yeah.
I don't have the
Fine.
exact, I don't have the exact number for the cameras in front of me.
Do you have the exact number?
You know what that number is?
I don't.
Do you have the exact number?
Derek's got the quote. I want to say 15. It was like it was 15 and change, but he had tax on the quote, so the tax comes off. It was like 14,875, something like that.
Is there a possibility these could go down after they go out the bid?
Which? The
Yeah,
playground?
Yeah.
The playground, quite honestly, we went out to bid for cloth, and we had one bidder, and that
Yeah.
was this company. I just got a name of a company from my son in Mendon, who's the parks director there, about another company looking for work. So when we put it out to bid, I will contact them and say, hey, look, I may actually have them come and give us a quote so they're familiar with the site so they can bid on it.
Okay.
Yeah. I tried last time. I tried to solicit a half a dozen places, and I got no response whatsoever. But, yeah, it is possible. You're right. I mean, we
But
could
probably
get
not much,
quotes.
if any.
I doubt it. I'm not optimistic on that. I'm finding that the bid process isn't really getting
So this
much
is
anymore.
121. The ask says 191, so is that?
So it looks like a total of $136,032 would be the total, and I think one thing that Derek and I had discussed earlier is if you can get this project done, you can submit the bill to our treasurer collector and we would pay it directly.
Pay it directly to the
Yeah.
vendor, okay?
We would pay it directly to the
As
vendor.
opposed to paying through us.
Right.
Okay.
It'd be easier for us to do it that way.
Yes.
The only thing I would tell you is that sometimes these guys want a purchase order before they'll start work. I mean, I can issue a purchase order from the school district, and then we can just like close it at the end. But unless you guys want to do a purchase order, I don't know, do you do purchase orders from the town? You don't, so I would still, I can just produce a purchase order without any, without a problem, and then close it and void it out when it gets to the end. That's fine with us.
Yeah, maybe we can just use that purchase order, if that's easy enough to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll copy you guys on it so you have a copy of it. Like I said, first I got to get the bids out and see, so it's probably still 3 or 4 weeks away. And this project won't get done until summer, so you're probably talking August before you're going to see any bills on it anyway. The cameras we're hoping to do in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. And the playground issue?
Yeah. You guys know where to find me.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Somebody want to make a motion?
You got the number.
I have the number, it's just what was the name of that fund exactly?
The Bachelor, nope. The Bachelor Knowlton School Trust Fund.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we appropriate from the Bachelor Knowlton School Trust Fund the amount of $136,032 payable for the construction of the school playgrounds and a camera security system.
And that's unanimous action.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
As much as I'd love to stay for the rest of the night, I think I'll.
Good night.
Moving along quickly, Jay.
What's that? The thing didn't go off my script because I didn't even write it down. So I'm all off flipping yet.
Very good. Everybody had a piece of the puzzle there, right?
Exactly.
The camera numbers, everybody has.
We'll jump back up to item 4.1. Chief Bradley, sir. This board has received a request from a Florence Circle resident for a no parking sign at the entrance of the development. The resident in their request stated that the cars from the BVT students are parking in a location that have obstructed the views of cars trying to exit development. So,
Yes.
I understand that your officers have been out there a few times to investigate, so.
Yeah, over the course of the last month, we've been there several times. What's happening now is it usually takes place this time of the year when new drivers are going to school, the seniors are still there. There's not adequate parking at Blackstone Valley Tech. So some of the students are parking on the sides of the roadway. In particular on Florence Circle, parking on both sides of the road, which has obstructed school buses and obstructed the ability of emergency vehicles to have access to that neighborhood. So we dealt with this issue probably about a dozen years ago on Henry's Path and Josiah Drive, and what we did is we posted signs which were approved by the Board of Selectmen to limit the parking during those hours for 2-hour parking. And I believe you have a copy of the sign, a picture of the sign that's there. So our proposal to rectify this situation is to post signs limiting the parking in that neighborhood so it won't obstruct vehicles and buses.
There's multiple, sorry.
Okay. I just wondered, does your school resource officer monitor the area, write tickets or anything? Or?
Well, we're not writing tickets now because it's not posted, so it's legal to park on the public way until the point where you're obstructing traffic. So the school resource officer has been talking to the school. The school's a little bit limited because it is a public way. It's off school grounds, so what they can do is limited.
So there's not much traffic laws or distances or anything?
There are distances from the intersection. Most of the cars have been parked far enough away from the intersection that it doesn't violate the parking regulations.
But by putting the sign in, then that gives him the authority to do more?
Correct. Correct.
So that's it, that answers my question.
So just, Chief, because this to me, the root cause of the problem obviously is the students from BVT and too many people. Is the issue that they don't have enough spots for their cars, or is the issue that
That's correct.
Students, it's closer, so they're parking in the closest spot, even though there are spots, or what's?
They don't have enough parking.
Okay.
So some of the underclassmen do not receive parking permits, and so they park in the streets around the neighborhood. We
Okay.
had the same issue at Nipmuc.
So these aren't kids with permits that are parking over in the neighborhoods.
Correct.
These are kids that can't get parking permits, and so they're
Correct.
parking in the neighborhoods.
Yes. I mean, the real fix to the problem is for the school to have additional parking for these students.
Right.
Unfortunately, they don't have the space to do that at this point.
Yeah. And I was going to say, couldn't they issue fewer parking passes? But they are, but that's not what the problem is, so.
Correct. We had the same issue at Nipmuc Regional many years ago.
Yeah.
When they were at capacity for parking, and this is how we were able to deal with that issue.
Got it. What about so I guess two things. Obviously, the request came from a neighbor, so that's one neighbor that doesn't mind having the sign up. I know for me, I wouldn't want a sign in my front yard that said no parking at any time, so that's my only concern. I don't know how many signs we're going to put up, where we put them, and how we work with the residents, so that's one concern I have on behalf of the residents. And then the second one is there a way to, put something either along the lines of, no parking during school hours, or no parking from 8 to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, or no school parking, or something that's more specific, because I'd hate to put up no parking for more than 2 hours, and then people that are visiting residents there think, oh, geez, I can't park here for a barbecue type of thing.
Right. So it's limited to Monday through Friday, and I believe the hours are 8:30 to 2:30?
It says
So you have
7
it?
A to 2 p.m. sign.
7 to 2. That's when the 2-hour parking is in effect, and it's not in effect on holidays or during the summer months.
Yeah, okay.
So that should address the concern there.
Okay, and then the only other thing is the placement of the signs on people's property. I mean, I know it's the easement, but,
Right. So what we would do is place one sign at each entrance to the development. That's what we did on Henry's Path and Josiah Drive.
and that's enough to cover the street.
Correct.
Great, all right.
The other thing of note is regarding these times, it would not interfere, it looks like it wouldn't interfere with the 4th of July celebration fireworks.
That's correct.
Good point.
Yeah, so that's good as well, so.
Are there any other events or times that we would want people to park there, that people use that as parking that you're aware of, like town events or anything, football games and things like that?
No, it's usually the 4th of July celebration and the issue that we have for school here.
Otherwise, it's open. Okay. I'm good.
Nothing else?
I have nothing else. Okay. So, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the request for street signs along Florence Circle.
Second?
It's unanimous action.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah. Our next item is a discussion regarding a request to change the Fire EMS Advisory Board appointments. So is there any chiefs here? So we've received a request from the EMS Fire Advisory Committee to appoint a non-resident to its committee. Currently, the bylaw that requires the Fire and EMS Advisory Committee interferes with our Board of Selectmen policy.
It does,
So,
right.
I know
The committee is made up of 2 on-call reps, 1 career rep, a citizen, who is myself, and the chief. And so we've got no problem with getting the call staff to volunteer, because there's plenty of them to volunteer. But right now, we only have 2 residents to fill a career slot. There are 4 career
Currently, yes.
currently, 2 out of town and 2 in town. 1 just moved into town. And you can only serve 2 two-year terms. After that, you have to leave for 2 years before you can get reappointed. So we're going to have some difficulty in getting the career slot filled. We've got a couple of projects. We've met recently a couple of times. We've got a couple of projects that we're working on that we think we can move the department forward a little bit and get some things done, but we need a little more ability to get a career person. And as it is, the three of the 5 members, including myself, we will be off the committee by 4s in 2020. So, we're facing in a little over a year, 3 of us have to leave, and we have to leave for 2 years because we've served our 2 terms.
Is that policy being evaluated? It seems like that's the root of the problem.
Well, that is sort of related. I mean, if we wanted to
But
change
you-
the policy so that we could serve 3 terms, it might be a little easier.
My own opinion, again, and I'm a new person to the whole process here, but I don't think that's the root of the problem. we have a fair representation from the call department, we have a fair representation from the citizenry. I'm sure if we put it out, there's certainly a big pool to choose from. It's just that the career staff, if the overall objective of this committee was to get representation and fair representation from all of the different factions within the department, you're limiting the career staff to a very small, finite group. So the thought was, if we allowed a career person, so you'd have to be a career firefighter for the Upton Fire EMS Department. If you're not a career firefighter for the Upton EMS Fire Department, well then, you can't hold that spot.
Right.
So irregardless of the ability whether they live in town or out of town, if the picture was to get fair representation across the board, that's kind of what we thought. But given that, we have the general rule of the way the town is set up, that all committees must be made up of town residents, we thought this might be, quote, the exception to the rule, given how the committee was created and what it was for. Does that sound about right from my picture?
And if we were to change our bylaw, we have to make, or our policy, we have to make sure that other people aren't gonna start putting in for committees like, housing and this and that.
Correct.
So whatever we do, we have to write it. But my thing is, do you feel that the career needs that representation on the Fire EMS Advisory Board, seeing that they also have union representation, that they can bargain stuff?
Well, again, we went back, because again, I'm new, so I said, let's go back to the beginning. So there was a lot of misconceptions on what this Fire EMS Advisory Group was supposed to be for. Some thought this was the vent for the call department to come in and voice their frustrations on issues with the department, or issues with policy, or issues with service delivery and those types of things, and that's not really the case.
'Cause I think the way they kind of sold it when they created this Fire EMS Advisory Committee was the Board of Engineers.
Yep.
They were being removed, and they were worried about not having some authority. Because if you kind of read it, the way it's even written, because it's supposed to talk about creating policies to give to the fire chief.
Right.
So I never agreed with even the way the general bylaw is written.
Right, and that's something that I think, what our thoughts were was, and nothing against this group of selectmen, but since a lot of us are still trying to learn what this advisory group is for, that we'd wait till the new election, so that we could all maybe sit down as a collective group and go through what is the role and responsibility of this Fire EMS Advisory Committee. And since I've heard words that we as a committee are supposed to work on your behalf, well, I haven't read that, so I don't know. So maybe we sit down as a group to understand what is it that we want this group to do, and give a clear direction. So, and to answer the chairman's question, I believe if the original intent of the group was to get fair representation across the board, well, then a career person should be allowed to be on the board, irregardless of where they live. Because it's supposed to be a fair representation of all of the internal groups within the department.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think there's a bigger opportunity here to evaluate the role of this committee and make sure we clarify exactly what its purpose is. I think it was put in place at a point in time where there was some anxiety about the change that was taking place, and to make sure that that transition went smoothly. But now that we're through that transition, it may be time to either change the focus of the group or look at other alternatives as well.
And that's kind of what I thought it was built on, is you were moving from a board of fire engineers and two separate groups to a single point chief, merging fire and EMS, all of these things. There were going to be issues and concerns between all the groups, and how do you make that all work? So I think that's what this group was for, was to address some of the frustrations as they went forward, and that was a good 8 or 9 years ago.
About 8
So
years
some
ago.
things have changed.
Right, and I think there's another situation where the committee, if it's to serve the Board of Selectmen, it gives an opportunity, so in theory, the committee would communicate with the Board of Selectmen, not through the chain of command. So say a call person or a career person, as you mentioned, may not have the ability to ever speak with a selectman, or may not feel comfortable bringing a problem up through the chain, thinking it'll just get filtered out before it gets to us. So, yeah, I think it's certainly a good opportunity to sit down as a group, the two committees together, our board, your committee, and try to figure out, what exactly would be the focus of the mission statement, per se, of what we really want to try to achieve.
And the other thing we looked at too was this committee is kind of unique in that it has no authority. Really, when you boil it all down, it really doesn't. So the way the town's rules are written, that any other committee a town resident must serve, and I believe all those other committees have some type of authoritative function or responsibility. This group really didn't have that. So we thought that if we made the exception to the rule for this group, it would fit,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just don't want to open up Pandora's box. And
I know, and when I first asked Derek, he showed me the line where it says, residents, which makes sense for most of the committees. It's just, with two people to choose from, we've actually tried to get one of them to apply and haven't been
what about the one moving
successful,
to
so now we're down to
town?
one person.
We haven't asked him yet, he was moving like the last 2 days, so.
He's moving, so we're gonna ask him.
If we do change it, we have to find a way to word it appropriately for this
True.
specific committee.
And you may not be able to do it now, you just at least understand the request and,
So how would we do that if we wanted to change the committee to allow for non-residents for those two full-time positions, or those two full-time seats?
Right, so there is no, this is a past practice. It's theoretically not even a Board of Selectmen policy to our research and Sandy's research. Sandy did a lot of work in trying to find out what other communities do, and a lot of communities do have non-resident appointments. So we wouldn't be unique in saying, well, we can appoint a non-resident, but the point is well taken that historically we've only appointed residents, and so if we make this exception, is it going to open up opportunities for other non-residents? And so,
Other non-residents in what context?
if we'll say a non-resident wants to apply to the ZBA.
Okay, so you're just talking, okay, so is there a way for us to focus, that's what, Gary, your point was, how do we focus this just for this advisory?
So, yeah, I think an idea you could do is make a temporary appointment and then maybe spend the better part of the next 6 months. One of the tasks of this committee is to look at the bylaw and then come back for a November town meeting for a potential change to remedy this situation permanently. Because you can make the appointment now, but you're not remedying the problem. You always talk about the root cause. The root cause is still going to be there, so until we make a bylaw change, you're always going to have that problem, and you'll be faced with the same issue in next year, right?
right.
So-
Next year it's gonna be worse.
Right, so I think, you could make an exception to this issue, knowing that maybe it's a temporary appointment until we can have a permanent change. Because there is a lot of work ahead of this department, a lot of work, and they could use the help.
So we definitely could make a suggestion for a temporary appointment,
Yeah.
if that is agreeable.
I was going to just throw out one other idea that would be a little more in line of, I think, what we did in the past with a recent committee, and that would be to make that non-resident appointment an ad hoc member, where they wouldn't,
Non-voting, you mean?
non-voting.
Yeah, that is.
So we could do it that way, and, that may mitigate the other problem where we
But,
wouldn't have it.
The only thing I would say is if they feel that they need to have that career representation, that he should be able to vote on their behalf to represent that body part, it'd be,
Right, because
You
there's
can
only
only-
one
yeah.
career slot on this
And it'd
committee,
be-
there's two for the call
right,
staff.
so he'd be outvoted all,
Okay.
so.
Well, do you think the next logical thing to do would be to sit down with the two boards and try to figure out what the best way to handle this is and
I
get
think
it?
we need to look at our policy and come up maybe with something that we can all come to agreement on, so.
And at the same time, give the board some direction, which I think is another underlying problem
Yes.
from what I'm reading here, is we have that as well. So we're not gonna solve it by just plugging somebody in. We really need to meet and try to get an idea of
Yes,
what what your viewpoints are and, what everybody thinks we should be moving towards. I look at it and I say efficiencies. That's what I think is. I think, how can we be more efficient? How do we find some value somewhere? Whatever it may be, whether it's with regard to equipment or whatever, regionalizing services to some extent, whatever it may be. That would be my thoughts, but.
so do we want to schedule at some point a working session, Derek, is that what you would do? To have the two groups meet?
If the Board of Selectmen would like to have that, yeah, so that's certainly something that they could entertain, yeah.
I would just recommend waiting
Try
until
that.
May.
Right. Would you like to serve as the citizen
thank you.
representative?
What would you like us to do now? I think
We don't
that,
even have a request, so I think we could just table it. We don't have anybody putting in
Right.
for the position.
It's not necessary that we can ask the
I can certainly,
Career
poll the
staff.
career staff and see if
right,
there's anyone
and see
interested
if they can,
and work from there, but, we haven't.
but we only
We
have
weren't
two
sure
choices.
what the process was for you guys.
Right. So, we'll poll the two that we've got, and hopefully one
Well,
person.
we have three, actually, we have 4 career staff.
Right, no,
so we
but the
can
two
poll all.
residents, though. We'd have to ask one of the two residents to try to serve, and then schedule
Well,
a
you
working
could
session.
ask any one of them and then ask us to appoint one of the non-residents if they decided
True,
to.
right.
Even
As
if
a
it was a
temporary.
temporary appointment, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
that works, does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, great,
Good.
thank you.
All right, very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Is Mr. Combs here? We did have a request from Mr. Combs to donate a tree in the memory of his father. Do you know if he was planning on attending?
He was invited to attend, so he's not here.
I'm just gonna pass over this one, and we'll reach out to him again, see if he wants
See
to
if he
come in.
can come in on the
Yep.
23rd.
Do we know where he was thinking of putting it?
No, that's all.
No, it was on town property, so it would
But we have
be,
no idea where.
no.
So that's, I didn't do anything. Okay.
Okay.
Our next,
Smiling, I'm
I
smiling.
wonder,
about
has
the
that
tree
been
placement,
done,
not about the person.
you know, has it ever been done before? Would there be a particular area in town where that would be suitable? I don't know.
Probably one of the parks, I think,
Yeah.
probably most appropriate.
I was gonna see
I
if,
want to talk to the DPW, Dennis Westgate, and his staff to see if there's an area, a park that maybe they want to beautify. Maybe we can get some suggestions from them. Most appropriate. I guess what we don't know is, usually when you dedicate something like this, usually it comes with some type of
plaque or sign?
plaque or sign to the dedication, and so we don't know if that's part of the process or not.
I didn't know if his father had a favorite part of town, or a park or something.
We don't have a lot of details.
Right, right. Maybe Heritage Park or something like that.
So our next agenda item is to execute the annual town warrant. We've all had a chance to look at it. I know Mr. Metallion has a few questions.
Yeah, we had discussed earlier, the article regarding snow and ice budget. Obviously, we're not out of the fall weather just yet, so we don't have an exact number on that. But I think, you could speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, sure. The last time the DPW director checked on the current status of the snow and ice budget, we were approximately $40,000 above our $240,000 appropriation. And so we felt very comfortable with that. I mean, compared to previous years, we were about $125,000 over last year, and about $120,000 the year before. So comparatively speaking, we're doing really well. But like, to your point, we're not out of the woods yet. We do expect some type of wintry mix tomorrow, and then again later on in the week. So we'll have to see if that has any impact on our budget. But certainly much better than the $200,000 we had earmarked for a town meeting. We will certainly come well under that.
Okay. Very good. Go ahead, what else did you
Do
have?
you have anything else? No?
There were some other questions, but we actually discussed it before the meeting, so I think we clarified some of those issues regarding some of the, probably a good time to bring it up.
Sure.
There's some wages that were amended in November, and because they were amended then, the increment, what you're gonna see as far as the year-to-year change, looks like a much bigger number than it is. So there was an adjustment last year, which didn't show up in the last May's budget, so it's gonna look like, you know, 4.8% on some of the wages. So that was something that we had discussed before, but just kind of put a notice out to the folks so they'll have a better understanding that that just represents an adjustment that was made back in November.
It's because they took a zero the previous year. They settled their contract, so they got their 2.5 plus the 2, or the 2 plus the 2.5 plus the additional what is it?
2 days.
52.2,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that gives you the 4.88, was it?
Yes, something like that. 4.3. Yeah. Okay. So that was one thing I just wanted to clarify.
I think it would also be worthwhile talking, Derek, about the videos that we plan on doing to publicize those on some of the key issues that are going to be coming up at town meeting. I think it would be great to let folks know what that is and when we can expect to see them, so people can start being on the lookout for those and spreading the word.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Great
thank you
idea.
for bringing that up. I planned on bringing that up on the town manager report, but now is a good time to talk about it. So in an effort to try to educate the public on this coming town meeting, we've done a lot in the past. I think every year we try to add something new. So last year we added social media to our educational efforts. Going to continue to work with the town crier on educating the public on the budget and the various articles. But this year we're trying to add a new strategy, and we're working with a media firm that is going to put together a series of 7 videos, very short 2 to 3 minute videos, and we're really focused on kind of some of the major budget drivers. So the fire chief is going to be talking a little bit about the rescue pumper and the need for that and the costs associated with that and the debt that's going to be involved in that. Our DPW director is going to talk about Fowler Street Bridge and the cost and the deterioration of that bridge. Per the request of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Health and staff are going to talk about the 33% increase in trash and recycling this year and some of the international market and what's caused those numbers to rise. We are also working with the Economic Development Committee, and they've already sketched out an outline and talk about all the work that they've done in the past 3 months to create a vision for a revitalized downtown. And lastly, Kelly is going to talk about, and if you can zoom in on this, Glenn, this is our new budget format, so very different than we've seen in the past. We've typically seen this Excel spreadsheet, and the moderator will go through the Excel spreadsheet, line items 1 through 10, anybody want to hold, so on and so forth. So this year, it's a new budget format, so one of the videos we're going to develop is going to outline the process in which town meeting is going to take place and how folks can hold an item, how they can talk about an item, so on and so forth. So this is all going to build up to the April 24th Finance Committee's hearing. So the hope is that with these little short videos and through social media and through the town crier, we're going to drive folks to the Finance Committee's public hearing so that we can have these one-on-one discussions. Because although folks ask questions at town meeting, it's really hard to have detailed conversations, especially you got board members sitting on the stage, you got FinCom members sitting down on the floor, and so it's more intimate if we can have these discussions at the public hearing. And so we're trying to get more than 2 to 3 people that typically attend these meetings and go there, and hopefully we have a good turnout so we can try to mitigate some of the concerns that folks have going into town meeting. So we met with the firm today. We've outlined those 7 videos, and then we're going to start shooting them next Monday to be released the following Monday over a series of 2 weeks.
And then we'll announce them, I would think, via Twitter, Facebook, and share them and put them on in the paper and wherever else we can point people to them.
Right, yep. We're going to try to distribute them far and wide.
Yeah.
And again, they're all going to begin with an opening, and then all going to end with, please attend the April 24th Finance Committee meeting at 7 p.m. at Town Hall so we can answer more of these questions in detail.
Great.
Will that public hearing be televised?
It should be televised, right? I think it typically is.
Yeah, we can have it here, but
Depends what you have.
yeah, actually, I believe we discussed asking conservation to move downstairs so we could
Yeah,
have
this
this
room.
one for the public hearing. As a matter of fact, I'll put a reminder to ask conservation, because they usually meet that night.
Oh, one video I did not talk about is the school superintendent is also going to do a video to
Great.
talk about the regional school budget as well. So those are the
Great.
seven videos.
Great. And those will be presented at the annual town meeting.
They're going to be presented as of 2 weeks from now throughout the community, and we're thinking about ways where we can also use them as an adjunct to town meeting. So if somebody puts a placeholder on the school budget or the trash budget, well, let's just hit play. I think Kelly came and said, we'll hit play on the trash budget video, gives people 2 minutes overview of what's going on, and then certainly we'll have the Board of Health and staff there to answer any detailed questions. So we want to use it as many ways as we can.
Great.
Anything else, Ms.?
No, thank
Ms.
you.
Flaherty?
I think the intent here is to kind of stop the silly questions at town meeting and try to make it flow a lot faster, because you all know that every so often there's some questions and you say, geez, you came to me before the meeting, I could have answered it, could, you know, whatever. Probably saved 10 minutes here, you know?
Hopefully it helps educate too, so.
I beg your pardon?
Hopefully it educates and they're a little bit more informed, so. Quite
And
makes sense.
there's some big budget drivers, so I'm sure there will be some spirited discussion on the floor. But, you know, it is what it is. And I have nothing else.
Anything else? Want to make a motion to accept the warrant?
Ready?
Yep.
You want to make a motion?
Sure. I make a motion that we accept the town meeting warrant as written and for May 2nd, 2019.
Second motion?
That's unanimous action. Moving along.
Nice work, Derek, and everybody else that did all the work to
Chief was
pull
there
it
today,
together.
Dennis.
Everybody's pointing at you, Kelly. It's nice when we
Team
point fingers
effort.
to say
Team
thank you,
effort.
so that's good. That's a good kind of pointing fingers. It's great. Good.
I really like this idea of the videos too. I think it's going to be, love it. Great.
Yeah, progress.
Good. Our next
Transparency, that's what we're all about.
That's right. And hopefully we'll have a good crowd.
I hope
We
so.
always want to see an increase in participation, so it'd be interesting to see.
We're getting there.
Our next agenda item is to approve the mission statement and scope for the electronic voting committee. We have a proposal sent to us from the electronic voting committee, and I'm going to read both the mission statement and the scope, and then we can discuss it. The mission statement would be the electronic voting committee of the town of Upton establishes a mission to investigate the mechanics and merits of using an electronic voting for town meetings. The scope would be the scope of the committee's investigation to include the following topics: the accuracy of the votes, transparency of the votes, process, participation, efficiency, electronic voting policy, and procedures, privacy issues, and costs. The committee will prepare a written report addressing these topics. So, do you guys have any questions or concerns with either the mission statement or the scope?
Well, this looks pretty detailed to me. I don't have any questions. So,
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, Sally Morelli, 148 South Street. Brett, we received your concerns about making sure that we find out those towns that actually investigated and chose not to participate in
I
electronic
didn't
voting.
even, that might be
We
hard to do.
actually had identified that as something we were going to do, and
Awesome.
Derek has actually already been sending us stuff from the list
Good.
about different.
Perfect, because I think that's the most important thing, is not only talking to towns that have done it,
Right.
but also people that have investigated it and chose not to do it, right? So we don't want to just hear from people that did it, because presumably they're more fond of it than people that might have evaluated not. So that's
Pros
awesome.
and cons, yes.
Yeah,
So
wonderful.
thank you for that, and thank you.
Thank you. This is great, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm good with it if someone just wants to.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, make a motion? Make a motion that we accept the proposed mission statement and the scope of work for the electronic voting committee.
Second?
It's unanimous action. So, going on. Do you have anything else, Mr.?
Town manager?
Yes,
report?
sir.
Yeah, I got a few things.
It's all yours.
So the last time I presented, I talked about a really positive meeting that Dennis Westgate and I had with District 3 DOT office in Worcester. And one of the items I talked about was we requested, actually through Selectman Simons, actually, he brought this up to us about 2 months ago, maybe now, thinking about, can we put stop signs over here on Grove Street? And we carried that request to District 3. And if you look outside your window here, there are now 2 new stop signs at the corner of Grove and Main. And then if you're further up down Grove by the bridge, they have a sign that says stop ahead. So giving folks time to know that there's going to be a stop ahead, which is super important. And then they're going to stripe they're gonna, as soon as the weather gets better, they're gonna stripe that so people can see where the stop line is. They're also gonna restripe all of the crosswalks in the town center area as well. So I appreciate them doing that right away, and they said as soon as the weather breaks, they want to do that, and to their word, they actually did it. So that's positive. I talked a little bit about the videos already. I wanted to bring up just briefly of a meeting that we had on Friday. So it was myself, the chief was in attendance, the DPW was in attendance, folks from the Board of Health were there, 3 staff from DEP were in attendance, and we were meeting with the Grafton-Upton Railroad. And so, actually, Selectman Simons was there as well, so thank you for attending. So there's a bunch of us in that room, and we were listening primarily to the Grafton-Upton Railroad. They have a lot of plans for expansion. So just a couple of things that folks need to understand. One, they want to add additional spurs. So they're thinking about adding additional 13 spurs in their network at their station. They want to construct a new building that they're going to store all their pellets in. They want to construct an additional building to store all their chemicals in as well. So they're thinking with the new construction alone, it's going to be about $10 million worth of new construction at the site. But again, it's going to bring in more work, more rail cars, more 18-wheelers. So part of that conversation, in order for them to construct the spurs, add the additional spurs, they have to cross over our sewer main. We have a gravity-fed sewer main on their property. We own the easement. And so they're talking to us now, to their credit, as to what we need to do. It's an aging main. I think it's a clay main, so certainly very fragile if we're going to introduce vibration above it. So that was one item we had to discuss. The other item, I think, is a big ticket item that's been going on here for decades now, is the closure of the landfill. They seem to think that the town still has substantial stake in the landfill closure. They're suggesting up to 50%. They want the town to take responsibility for the landfill closure. What does that mean? Primarily what it means is that we would incur 50% of the monitoring costs. So there's monitoring wells all around the landfill that once the state approves their permit, we would have to monitor for over 30 years. So we made 0 commitments. We were there more on a fact-finding mission. Again, it was great to have state officials there. They looked at a lot of the wetlands. They looked at the landfill. We walked the landfill with them. We had some sidebar conversations with DEP officials. So at some point, we're really going to have to sit down, meet with them, meet with the attorneys, hear their case as to why they think the town is responsible for the landfill closure. They seem to believe that they have a really strong argument, and that if we had to litigate it, that they would win. But again, we haven't explored it. I can tell you through history, the previous town manager had explored it with KP Law, our council, and KP would always recommend that we don't take responsibility for it. We do not take responsibility for it. The town never owned it, never operated it, therefore they don't believe we have responsibility for it. Yeah. The railroad thinks that there's case law out there that would lead us down a path that we would have to take responsibility for it. So I bring that up because it was the first larger meeting we've had. We've had small meetings going back to December, but we thought at this point it made sense to bring all the parties together and start this conversation. So more to come. They would like to start construction. I think, of the chemical building late fall. They would like to start construction of the spurs in the pellet building in 2020 sometime. So we have a little bit of time, but the way government operates, it's going to come. It'll be in front of us before we know it.
Will we receive any additional taxes for any of these?
So they estimate that we would receive an additional $70,000 to $100,000 in new tax growth because of the new construction. They're predicting it's going to be at least a $10 million build-out of the new construction. So, and we also working with the Board of Assessors office, and they're looking at how CSX is taxed through the City of Worcester. So City of Worcester has a very large assessing department, and we believe that they've been taxing CSX in Worcester for a long time now. So we're trying to learn more about how they do it to see if there's other ways that we could be receiving additional revenues through the railroad. But because they're protected through the federal government, they have a lot of exemptions.
then, just out of curiosity, do you have an estimate of how much it costs to cap a landfill?
Approximately, the landfill's been capped, it's really the monitoring to costs, so that could be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 a year in monitoring
But if
costs.
they find something, then if we accept 50% of that, then we're liable for any of the pollution that's found.
So great
So-
point, so say there was migration, say there was some type of breakout, they found VOCs now impacting the local wetlands, in theory, we would be responsible for 50% of that liability.
Which could be millions.
Yep, that's right. So we gotta be careful as we entertain those discussions.
What's the next step in those discussions? Are they planning a follow-up meeting, or what's the plan, right?
So
It
they're
sounds like we
gonna-
have issues with the sewer main, as well as regarding the capping and monitoring of the,
So the DPW is gonna work with them around the sewer. There is not a lot of data on the sewer main. There's manhole covers that have gone missing, so we gotta relocate those, and then work with engineers to determine what's the best course of action. And then once we decide what the best course of action, I think what they would like to do is they'd say, okay, we're gonna replace the sewer main and then encapsulate it. What's that cost? What's the cost of the monitoring? What's the new revenue? They'd like to put all that on the table and then negotiate an agreement to the point where they may say, okay, well, we'll cover the cost of the sewer main, but you will take on 50% responsibility for this landfill. So again, I think we really got to understand what are the true costs of all these different projects, and then come back at a later date and have a conversation on where the town stands. I think that if we say, no, we're not taking responsibility, then they're going to try to force our hand with the sewer main and on a few other projects.
so who is it that makes those decisions? Would it come to us to negotiate, or is it something that goes before the board to negotiate those things? So they can't do anything regarding the sewer main or the 50% or anything like that until we agree to it?
Right.
Great.
Right now, in DEP's opinion, they own the landfill. It's their responsibility. So they can't, so when they apply for their permit, that's why they want to get this done in advance, because once they apply for their permit to officially close the landfill, then DEP is going to want to know about their monitoring plan. And then that's where they're going to have to take the responsibility. So I think what they'd like to do is say, well, we're in full public-private partnership, that's a term that they use, with the town, and this is how we're going to close the landfill, do the monitoring, so on and so forth. But they haven't gotten us to that point yet.
Do you know if there's any monitoring going on as of now?
Yes, there is. There's been 3 years worth of monitoring. 3 or 6 years?
6 years.
6 years of monitoring, yeah.
And it's
So
it's all been within sort of tolerances, and it's been, the amount of any issues has been decreasing. So the monitoring levels have gone down each year over the past 6 years, so.
The comment
The
goes.
landfill seems like the capping is working, I guess is the point, but that doesn't mean it won't change at some point.
It's important to bring this up because I know that there were a lot of people in the room and a lot of folks heard about this big meeting with the railroad, so I wanted to just bring this up so folks have some of the information that was discussed at that meeting.
And Chief DeFonso, do you have any concerns with the new chemical plan or anything, or is it too early to evaluate it?
It is too early to tell what they're gonna do. I did have the opportunity to walk the site and look at the chemical products that they have on site now. My experience with some of these rail yards is, while the town may want specific chemical properties or known chemicals, what are they gonna store on the site every day or every week? The rail cars come and go, so we're never gonna really truly know exactly to the moment what they have on site. My goal will be to get a general idea of what the most methyl ethyl bad stuff on the property might be, and then we can always plan for that. If it's less than that, that's great for us because it's easier to manage, but if it will never go beyond this particular line, then at least we've prepared to be at that line. So, but given what I saw for product material, it's not anything that they're not allowed to use, so, they're allowed to use and move chemicals around. But it seems like most of it's storage.
Mm-hmm.
They're using those spurs to be like warehousing for these large rail cars that then they come in and then move the product by truck in small units to their customers versus, trying to truck it by truck from across country. It seems to be kind of what they're doing, so.
How many spurs are there now? Do we know?
Oh, gee, I'm not exactly certain, to be honest with you. I would be guessing.
About a half a dozen, I'm guessing.
They did something last year, they put another line in or spur last year. And it looks like they're getting ready to either do some blasting or something now.
Right, so they're looking at more than doubling the number of spurs that are there now.
Right,
So it's a
yes.
significant uptick in the business and the operation that's going on there.
Hi, Lynn Hagerty, South Lane. Does this have to do with the grant that the railroad received for, I don't know, it's like $130 some odd thousand to put in two additional rail lines? It was with, came from Governor Baker, there was a grant.
They didn't mention a grant. They didn't mention not once a
They had
grant.
a grant for paraffin wax hauling.
Well, they do haul wax. That is,
Right, but this is.
or
this
Yankee
was,
Candle.
This is a grant to put in, so when you say spurs, that's what they mean by the second lines? I'm just trying to understand.
Well, they did put in a second line into the yard last year. So
Right.
they have two lines now coming into the yard.
Spurs where they park the trains overnight, or is that?
Yes.
That's who the
So they
Spurs are,
wanna-
so they're just dead
Like
ends.
store parking spots,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think they're right, they're dead ends, basically.
Right.
So they may have like 6 or 8 dead ends, let's just say, and they may increase that now to 13 dead ends,
Yeah.
perhaps.
They want an
13
additional
additional.
10.
Add
13
10.
additional.
Some more, yeah.
So that's just more chemicals that they could store.
Yeah, and for the most part, in talking with some of the owners and operators, is the wax business, the candle business is exploding exponentially, because now that they're overseas, Yankee Candle and some of the
Different
other
word, use a
manufacturers.
different word.
Sorry.
Sorry. Sorry.
The product material of wax is really gonna be the bulk of what they're gonna store there. So, again, wax isn't, it comes, when it gets here, it's solid, and they have to use steam heat to, re-liquefy the wax to get it out of the trucks, or get it out of the cars into the trucks. So, that's really what they were really expanding on, was the wax part. That seems to be a big part of the business.
I'm more worried about that smell coming back. A couple years ago, they were doing telephone poles or dipping or something.
Yeah, they didn't talk about
No,
any
they
of
moved
that.
the telephone. Those aren't there any longer.
Yeah, their real big business right now is that wax. They really want to expand that operation. They've got a good method to move the wax, get the wax out of the rail cars into trucking units, and move it to wherever the manufacturing plants are, so.
That heating process, is there a fire hazard in doing that?
No, it's all steam-based, so they have a furnace, AKA boiler, in a building that's separate from any other operation, and then they just run steam lines out to the rail cars, and believe it or not, it's just they cut a 4-inch pipe in half, and that's what's welded on the inside of the rail cars. So they just run the steam through, kind of like a radiator type system, that heats up the wax to liquefy it. It then comes out the bottom of the rail car, and then goes into the trucks, and the trucks have heating systems on them as well to keep the wax in a liquid form until it gets to the final destination.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I learned a lot that day just on the wax stuff. I know I have a lot more to learn about the rest of their operations, but I wanted to get a pretty good picture of kind of what they're doing and where they think they're gonna go, so.
I think for the most part, they've had a pretty good safety record since
Yes.
coming to town. I think you guys only had one hazmat call.
Yeah, there's only been, as far as since I've been here, I think we've only been up there 3 times. And 2 of them were alarm activations, and 1 was a problem with offloading product material. There was an event that occurred.
I did have a rail car run away one time.
Oh yeah, forget about that.
Yeah, runaway rail car. That was before my time.
That started in Grafton.
I ended up towing that vehicle, so
The rail car?
no such luck.
Well, I think it's good of you to bring this up as well in the meeting so that people are aware that these things are happening. We're trying to be transparent, let folks know very early that these changes are coming, and that there's opportunity to voice whatever perspectives, opinions, concerns. Now's the time to do it. Nothing is set in stone yet, but it sounds like it's going to happen, and it'll move pretty quickly over the next year or 2. So we want to make sure people are aware of this and that there aren't any surprises for folks that might be impacted, because obviously there's a long history here. So we want to make sure that we honor the public's right to know what's going on and share information and be transparent about everything that's going on down there. So if anyone has questions, please ask us.
And then just one quick question, getting back to that sewer main, is that something that, before they take on all this construction, is that something that wastewater enterprise is gonna be looking to upgrade?
Well, that's something that we're trying to determine what, we believe that it's probably the best course of action to replace that sewer main. So do we replace it in place, or do we relocate it? Those are the questions. Do we have to add a pump station depending on the relocation? So those are the questions that'll be asked. As you recall, that the enterprise account, there was funding appropriated at the November town meeting to do a complete analysis of all of our water and wastewater infrastructure, and this is going to be part of it. So we expect to see some recommendations come out in the next, 3 to 5 months from that analysis.
And again, nothing happens until all that discussion happens.
Right, that's right.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Back to you, Mr. Manager.
All right, 2 more items. So I just wanted to, we've talked a lot about, Fire Chief has talked a lot in the past 3 months of all the grant activity. They've applied for hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace communications, and we still hope to get that, working on other sources of funding for cardiac monitors, so on and so forth. But I wanted to just bring up the fact that the police chief, Chief Bradley, has recently applied for a $390,000 PSAP grant. If successful, and it's going to be tough to get it, but if successful, that would replace all of our dispatching console. It's getting old and antiquated, so at some point in the future, we're going to have to replace it. So thinking out of the box, going after a $400,000 PSAP grant. Dennis Westgate has recently applied for a $410,000 complete streets grant. He feels very confident the town is going to get that grant. So that'll be $400,000 we can put towards our streets and sidewalks to make them more accessible here in the community. And then lastly, the Economic Development Committee has recently applied for an $18,000 mass development grant. And if successful, it'll bring on a technical expert. If we are successful at town meeting with our articles, one, to accept the revitalization, the new vision of the town center, and if we're successful in selling the 2 parcels, the church and the parking lot, the grant would then pay for an expert to come in to write the RFP, to work with the boards and committees, to work with the EDC, so that the RFP captures all of the work and the vision of all those people that put all that time and energy in the last 3 months towards the downtown center. So it's not a lot of money when you think of dollars, but it's a major opportunity because we'll have an expert come in to help us write that RFP. So those are just I just wanted to bring those up because all the different departments are doing a lot of work on trying to bring in outside resources so we don't have to continue to go back to the taxpayer each year. So the last item I want to bring up, and has spurred debate in the past, I think my very first day working here I brought it up, Kelly laughs. Kelly and Dennis Westgate and myself, we have been working with trying to improve ADA, AAB accessibility to this building. As many of you know, our handicap parking spot is across the parking lot, AKA street. So in order for folks who have mobility impairments, they have to navigate this parking lot street in order to access the building. It even becomes more cumbersome in the winter months. So we have an engineering from CME has come up with 3 different options, all around ranging from $40,000 to $50,000 a year. For the project. There is funding that's already been earmarked to be able to do this work. One of the options, which is the one I think is our primary choice, is to move the handicap parking to this side of the building, to create a ramp in the sidewalk on this side of the building so folks can park head in and then offload and then access the building through a new ramp. We would change the configuration of the outside sidewalk a little bit to accommodate that change. And then we would have head-in parking on this side of the building. So right now it's parallel parking to this side of the building, it'd be head-in. So we would yield approximately, we have about 14 parking spots now. By doing head-in parking, we would then go up to 21 parking spots. That helps get folks on this side of the building. It still doesn't change the throughway we have through our parking lot. So there's a couple different ways to mitigate that. One, we could put in speed tables on either side of the parking lot to slow folks down. Or our primary choice is to close Warren Street down permanently and make this just what it should be as a parking lot, so there is no throughway traffic. So not looking for a decision tonight. Kelly's going to go to CPC tomorrow and talk a little bit about this to get their blessing. But we'd like to, at some point in the future, maybe as a look-ahead item, have a conversation about closing down Warren Street, even if on the short term we close it down with Jersey barriers, and then look at the long-term fix of closing the street down permanently when we do, hopefully, with the TIP project coming through town, a reconfiguration of this intersection.
Just curious, where's that money earmarked from? Or
CPC.
CPC.
It was part of the town hall renovations from 5 years ago.
And so I would assume that the head-in parking would end up encroaching more on the building, so we'd eliminate some of the grass and some of the sidewalk that's there, or
No.
would it go back further into the street, or how would
Right,
that
we
work?
would move the sidewalk back into the street,
Mhm.
and so then that would create the depth that you would need for head-in parking.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So it would narrow the entrance as you pull into the area, like the street, it would
Mhm.
narrow the street
Yeah,
in order to get that head-in.
the head-in parking.
that head-in
But there's
parking.
enough room in there to keep the parking over on the other side of the street
Absolutely.
and to add head-in parking on this side without cutting in towards the town hall building itself.
I think it's,
Okay.
eventually this is gonna be a close, whether it's from us or from the state, or even when you just redo the whole downtown, so eventually.
I mean, well, and they had said before that the fire chief, the police chief, the DPW director, all the residents, there's a lot of support for doing that.
Right.
And I think partly it not only addresses the problem with people parking and trying to walk across a busy street when parking, because people do come fast down here. I actually experienced it personally, where someone was coming down the hill and they weren't really looking for someone walking across the street. So regardless, we've heard that from a lot of people, as well as the fact that one less entryway for people pulling in and out of this, Kelly Square of Upton is not going to be a bad thing. So I think there's a lot of opportunity or benefit to looking at closing it. I don't like the idea of Jersey barriers, but maybe we can plant trees around the Jersey barriers.
Well, I'm happy you brought that up, because that's one thing I failed to mention. We talked about this at a previous staff meeting, and it was unanimous by the fire chief, police chief, DPW director, Kelly, the Board of Health. Everybody said, just close the street down. Like, why do we keep playing the game? Just like, close the street down. We will prevent any future harm.
Yeah.
The only negative that we've heard in the past is that it's gonna divert a lot of that traffic that's using Warren now up Church Street. And there's always a concern, because there's a preschool there, there's a concern that it's gonna take that additional traffic and put it through the day, through the preschool. So unfortunately, in our particular neighborhood here, with respect to the intersection out front, Warren Street, North Main Street, regardless of which way, unfortunately, it's just a tough situation. No matter, there's give and take to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to
Maybe
be
we could
some.
always put speed bumps in or something.
Yeah, I mean, as a short term, I know they make those kind of rubberized speed bumps. You would think in the short term, you may be able to try to use something like that, just to try to slow down the traffic.
Yep, you're right.
Clarity.
Especially until we know, what's going to happen out front, whether a rotary is realistic, if that's a situation, that will come to fruition or not. So.
You're still gonna have the issue with Warren Street, because anybody who parks in here, block it off, have to come out onto 140. So you're in the same boat. You really didn't solve any problem there. You did pick up the additional parking from the town hall.
Well, there would be a lot less cars coming through.
Agreed.
the parking
Oh, yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we brought it up at the staff meeting was because we were actually looking at doing speed tables on either side, as you're coming down the hill and as you're coming in order to make the area safer. And when we discussed that at the staff meeting, everyone was like, just close it. And, to your point, Selectman Italian, the police chief is, close it, just close it out. So, being aware of the preschool across, so I would say that we would maybe need to do something over on that street, on Church Street, versus just closing it here. And there's different avenues that we can use to close it. First, it could just be Jersey barriers until we know what's happening across the street, and then making it more of a permanent fix after we're done.
Curiosity, on the left side of the building, is that considered a street or a driveway?
It's considered a right of way, or an easement for their right of way to that house next door, because they don't have a.
It goes up to the street.
It goes out to the street, so it's more considered a right-of-way, easement right-of-way. And because it had been there for so long, when we did the renovation, it was concluded that there was no way to quote, take it away, because it had been in existence for so long. So that would create more traffic, because when we were doing the renovation, you did have some people that snuck down that road.
I was gonna say, we'd almost have to work with Chief Bradley to come up with some sort of, or a traffic engineer or what have you, to say what kind of signage or limits or one-ways or no-through traffic or whatever can you put there, because we certainly don't want people cutting through that way. Those are, I mean, they're barely even roads.
So people were finding their way during the renovation when this
Yeah.
was closed for 15 months. But, yeah, we worked through it. I'm sure we can work through it again.
Anything else, guys? Anything else, sir? Nope. Okay, any new business, sir?
The only thing is, that I thought of recently, and someone's been asking about it, is we should, as we have conversations at these meetings, we should be cognizant of the fact that there might be people in the audience that want to see hard copies of whatever it is we're looking at. So I don't know if there's a way to sort of have a few copies available of certain documents, or a packet of the documents in case people want to look along. I know they're all online, so that would be the other thing I would say, is if people want it, obviously you can look online and all the documentation is online, but maybe having one or two hard copies in case people want to see it. I would just submit that to the board at some point for us to talk about that. We don't have to do it now, but just something to think about.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Anything else?
No, I don't have anything.
The only thing I have for look ahead is the Loyalty Day Parade. I know, I forget the gentleman's name, he's emailed us, I'm not sure.
I think that is Mr. Wood.
Is that it?
Oh, Mr. McMahon.
Mr.
McMahon.
Yeah.
Just, I have to work that day, so make sure one of you guys reach out, so.
Are you able to attend, do you know?
What's the date? I didn't see the date.
May
6th.
6th. Yeah, I think it's May 6th.
It's Saturday, the first Saturday in May.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
That would be May 4th.
May 4th?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to look. I'd be happy to do it if I can do
It's
it.
typically on a Sunday.
Yeah, it was May 5th. It's Sunday, May 5th.
Yeah, it's typically a
Sunday,
Sunday.
May 5th.
I have flags.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I did it last year. I don't see why I wouldn't do it this year. Yeah.
So I told him that one of you guys would reach out to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I gave the speech last year, if you're comfortable
Yeah,
giving the
exactly.
speech this year.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Sure. Just give me a copy of yours from last year. File, save as Brett's speech.
You got yourself an Uncle Joe.
Exactly.
Does anybody in the audience have anything to say tonight? So you want to make a comment? Make a motion to
Okay.
get out of here?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I second the motion.
Unanimous.
Thank you.